Hey everyone, welcome back. And we have another one of our Australian Open contender profile videos. And today we'll be doing none other than the Russian juggernaut Daniil Medvedev. And apologies to our Russian viewers if I messed up the pronunciation there. Okay, so let's jump on to the content for today. But actually, before we do that, please hit the like button and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Your support means absolutely wonders to us. Okay, so let me take you back 12 months. Australian Open 2022, Daniil Medvedev. What were the headlines around the guy? It was more around the guy who has had an incredible 2021, finished as world number 4, an absolute beast on hard courts, and probably the guy who was tipped to succeed Novak and Rafa, at least on one surface, right? Hard courts. He was really consistent, and the fashion in which he beat Novak in US Open 2021 was amazing. Being able to defeat Novak in straight sets in a hard court Grand Slam final is an incredible achievement in itself. And the statistic that really stood out to me was in 2021 was his win loss percentage, which was kind of like big three level in its stature. So he won an incredible 83% of his matches, and that improved to 86, more than 86% on hard courts. That was just below Novak's 88%. So you're doing numbers like that. Only a matter of time you're going to move up the rankings and just start winning more Grand Slams. Um, Australian Open 2022, amazing for him until that third set 3-2 breakpoint up moment against Rafa. We all know how that match went after that. Rafa really upped his game. Um, the forehand really had an extra 5-6 miles on average. He started punishing Medvedev on the second serve more and really peppered his forehand a bit more. So tactically, an improved match from Rafa. He got that win in the bag, and who knows how deeply that loss impacted Medvedev, who was known to be a great competitor and really strong player mentally. So we don't really know how these losses can impact players, but um, it can have a huge impact. How do we know that? We know from experiences of other players. And interestingly, John McEnroe, was just made a comment yesterday that he thinks Medvedev isn't over that loss yet and is still haunting him. And he said that the 1984 loss he had to Ivan Lendl French Open final still haunts him to date. So these losses can, and I'm no psychology expert here, and don't want to make any claims here, but it won't be surprising if he was really impacted by that loss. And his 2022, the way it was shaped, was because of this particular loss to Rafa. So let's quickly look at how 2022 was for him, really. Following that defeat to Rafa, I think things start to get really downhill for him pretty much the entire season, and it was hard to take positives from Medvedev in the season then. Um, Loses to Rafa in Acapulco in a pretty easy fashion was not an expected result. And then really the North American hardcourt swing really, I think was really losing to Monfils in the three sets and then to Hurkacz in Miami. Probably he was impacted maybe by the hernia issue he had. He got a surgery, missed most of the clay court season, and I'm not going to go into clay much more. We all know he hates clay in his own words. And missing Wimbledon might have been tough mentally, right? He's not great on grass, but who knows? It might have impacted his confidence a bit more. And the guy who's really thrives on building momentum and just getting those wins under the belt wasn't able to do that. Um, I think the lowest part of the season was post Wimbledon, really, where the alarm bells really started to ring for him. And a random loss to Cam Norrie in Mexico. You come to the North American Swing League, and you're like, okay, you have the Masters now, and you have the US Open coming up. Medvedev is a defending champion, really, and okay, let's bring it. Um, what really happened there? A tough three-set loss to Kyrgios in was it Montreal or Toronto? I think Montreal, and then a 3-set loss to Stefanos Tsitsipas, a guy he has owned in his career, and you could bet your pretty much a pretty safe bet on Medvedev every time he was up against Stefanos, and he had beaten him earlier on in the Australian Open as well. So that was a bad loss for him, and went to the Australian Open clearly low on confidence, and fourth round, shockingly and unshockingly as well, lost to Nick Kyrgios. We all know how dangerous Kyrgios is, and he really upped his game last year. Seemed very serious about his tennis, but it was a bad loss for Medvedev, and he kind of went away a bit meekly in that match. And it was a poor effort, being a defending champion, going away in that fashion he did. And then really the streak of some random losses. We lost to Wawrinka in Metz, and really had tough losses against Djokovic. A random loss to Diminor again in Paris. I say random because Medvedev, you don't expect to lose these matches on hard courts, outdoor and indoor. And I think how he ended up the year really sums up where his state of mind and state of game is. World Tour Finals, loses all of his round robin matches in deciding tie breaks, two of them being against Rublev and Tsitsipas, the guy he has had great records against in the past, and one being Novak. And he obviously was in the lead so many times in that match, and Novak was struggling physically, but Daniil just couldn't complete the match, get the match completed. Apologies. So yeah, I think that really showed where his game really is. He was no longer winning the important moments, and the guy wasn't the same under pressure. So who knows? Maybe it was that Australian Open 22 loss that just triggered that event, and it just got worse and worse for him, being away from the game, Wimbledon. So 2022 was a tough one for him to take, and he comes in as world number 8 into this Australian Open, which is not anyone would have predicted if we were to ask them 12 months ago. Now, for we've talked about his recent form, and obviously he had a loss to Djokovic in Adelaide, not surprising, and you could really see his baseline game. He wasn't confident, even his backhand. He was dropping so many balls short, and Novak was really able to dictate play in that match. And there were only patches where you could see the old Medvedev just trying to step in sometimes and taking it to Novak, but it was a pretty convincing win for Novak, and he should be pretty happy about it. Now, coming on to the Australian Open in particular, let's talk about how Medvedev has done in Grand Slams in general. Unsurprisingly, his best success rate has come on hardcourt Grand Slams. He's won. So we've got 82% of his matches at the US Open and 76% at the Australian Open, followed by 67% and 54% at Wimbledon at the French, which is obviously quite expected. But yeah, he's done quite well on the hard courts, and really, and in terms of his main head-to-heads against his key rivals, he's obviously lost his last 4 matches against Novak, but he's still 9-4, which is pretty decent. He's 5-1 down against Rafa, and he might just run into Rafa again in the quarterfinals this year. Now that the draw is out, that one might be an absolute cracker. But yeah, both of them have a lot of tennis to play and really tricky draws to navigate early on. So who knows? We might not get that one, but should be a cracker if we do. And Tsitsipas is a worrying one for him. He might, depending on if we go by seeding, he might meet him in the semis. But really, if Medvedev can't reverse those losses he had against Tsitsipas, tough losses last year, it could mean trouble. Tsitsipas comes in playing very confident tennis. He played amazing at the United Cup, and so it's not looking great in terms of where his opponents are and where Medvedev is really in terms of form. But really, the guy we know has huge potential, and let's not try to really break his game down and see what we think are his main strengths, what his limitations are, and where he can do most damage. So his serve, I think, goes without saying, huge first serve. He's got the flat serve going really well for him on both sides. The wide serve, the T1. He's got a decent slider. He can do a lot of damage on the first serve, which he does. Second serve, though, I really have my doubts about his second serve. He doesn't have a great kick serve, and he finds struggles to find the right balance on his second serve, I think. He can sometimes hit those crazy 190 kilometer an hour, 200 kilometer an hour second serves. I remember a match he won against Novak, Cincinnati 2019. And in the third set, he was just absolutely cracking his second serve, hitting aces, and Novak just was shell shocked in that match. What the hell? So he can do that in matches where generally under pressure, he's often rolling that second serve in, and numbers really show you he gets punished sometimes, right? It's not one of his strength areas. And if you look at the number of points he has won behind his second serve in his career, he's won 52% points. And where do likes of Rafa and Novak stand? 55%. That's a big difference. 3%, but that's a big difference over the course of a career. And where does Andy Murray rank, who's renowned for having a weak second serve? Again, 52%, the same level as Medvedev. So he isn't in great company, at least as far as second serve points ones are concerned. And unsurprisingly, he only won 41% points against Rafa on his second serve last year. So it's an area players can exploit. Players with strong return games are going to continue doing that, and I haven't really seen his second serve really improved lately as well. So it remains an area of concern for him going forward as well, at least for the time being. Return of serve, very unorthodox. Such deep positioning in the court, struggles on the grass court for obvious reasons. You can't really be doing that on grass successfully. Not many players can return the ball from miles behind the baseline. Rafa comes to mind, obviously, and Del Potro comes to mind, but Rafa has a very different trajectory on his ground strokes with a lot of spin. So, amazing what Medvedev does from that deep and still able to make his way up the baseline to just be aggressive. He puts in a lot of returns back. He doesn't stay back all the time. He's obviously going to have phases. He comes in and tries to step up on the second serves and attack. He does that to Rafa, Novak, a lot of times, and he can be pretty effective in that category. So I think he's a pretty strong returner, and he knows how to construct points his way. That's what most important is about return game, right? Rafa doesn't have the best of returner serves, but his return game and the return games he has won in his career is one of the highest ever. And that's because he really knows how to construct points after that. He's hit that initial return. Forehand, ooh, not the best of forehands, we all know, and not the most prettiest looking forehand either. he he's had phases with his forehand, I would say. When he's low in confidence, his average forehand strike, I think, isn't too effective. He can be passive with that shot, but when he's confident, he can do a lot of damage with that shot, right? We saw last year in the US Open, Australian Open 22, the year before, US Open 21, one particular shot that he's really started to fire with was the forehand down the line. He tries to open up the court and then goes down the line, and that was surprising his opponents as well. And he was getting a lot of miles behind that shot, and so. But generally, one limitation in his forehand really is his lack of ability to really follow up and just go to the net. It I might pull up some. I would have liked to pull up some clips there, but maybe next time we analyze his game in a bit more detail. But a lot of the times you'll see Medvedev has a short forehand. He hits a decent enough shot. It's a great opportunity to go to the net, but the guy just doesn't. He's really reluctant to go to the net sometimes, and it's not something that's remained stagnant. I do think he's trying really hard to improve that and he's coming to the net more and more, but it remains an area that when he's under pressure and um, feeling the heat, he just prefers to stay back. And that can make the points unnecessarily longer for him. Talking about his Forehand, I think he is not able to create sometimes a lot of angles because he can't get that spin which some of his competitors can. But generally, it's a very consistent shot which helps him. Backhand, well, one of the best two-handers backhand in the game, without a doubt. He defends like a wall. He can change direction really well. He can step up, take it on the rise. His court positioning is not as favorable in general as someone like Novak is. So he can sometimes be a bit passive, like he was in Adelaide, but when he's really feeling it. And I was watching a practice set he played against Novak just yesterday, and he was really hitting that shot well. It was a practice set, but he was getting the depth on that shot right. So it's important for him to get that shot going if he is to have success at the Open this year. Right. But yeah, his backhand drive is amazing, but how bad is his for backhand slice? It has to be one of the worst backhand slices for top 20, top 15 players, and he is so uncomfortable aesthetically, technically, when he's forced to take one hand off the backhand side. He usually uses that to stay in the points when he's really stretched or wrong footed, but yeah, he doesn't really know how to use that shot, and it's clearly a really weak part of his game. And I think it would benefit him quite a bit if he is to improve that shot. Like, look at Novak, right? The guy never had a great forehand slice to begin with. Not as bad as Daniel, but it was a weakness. But how much has he improved that shot under Becker and then under Goran? It's a pretty effective shot now. It doesn't look great aesthetically, I would say, but it's pretty effective now, and he really uses it smartly to change the rhythm of matches. Case in point, his match against Korda recently in Adelaide, he used that pretty smartly. And Medvedev's game at the net, a lot to be desired. His backhand volley has improved. He can somehow carve out those off backhand volleys, if I were to say, with a short angle. He can pull off. And you interestingly, you see Medvedev hitting those serve and volleys sometimes, which I like, right? Shows you the guy is willing to do what it takes to really take the game to his opponents. But it's a weak area of his game, goes without saying, and I think he's pretty aware and he's working on it. Physically, one of the strongest player there is. He can run all day long and not get tired, and you can make him play five setter after five setter, and you can count on him to be there standing tall. Mentally, like I've said, he is generally considered to be pretty strong mentally by his fellow players, and his results back that up in general. But last year, he's been struggling. So he comes into this not in a great state of mind, probably from the results he's had, and he's lost so many tight deciding set matches last year, which might have a bearing on his confidence level coming into this Open. And how, very quickly, a couple things on um, his chances at the Australian Open. The draws come out, and I think things could get really tricky for him round three onwards. He could be facing Sebastian Korda, who looked amazing in Adelaide. He then could possibly face Hurkacz and then Rafa in the quarters and Tsitsipas. Obviously, this is just going by seedings and expected opponents, but the draws could really open up. But he has a tough draw, and he really, really needs to be on top of his game to be able to have the run he did last year. So good luck to Daniel, but it's going to be a tough one for him this fortnight. Lastly, I think I would just say, what does Medvedev need to do really to succeed long term? And I think that's a point that applies to not only Medvedev, but a lot of the up and coming players who are just trying to. Medvedev turns 27 now, so he's not young anymore. Not really old now that we're seeing people like Novak and Rafa doing things they're doing at 35, 36, but he's not young anymore, Daniel. And I think what really is going to define how he does now is obviously the mental state, but also how his game evolves. If I were to say what's the most impressive thing Rafa and Novak have done in their careers, that's probably their ability to keep improving, just finding that next level. They're just perfectionists. And even for someone like Alcaraz, I think that's the biggest question mark. Can he, right, at 19, you could say, yeah, he's very complete game wise, maybe complete than Rafa was, more complete, but can he continue to improve at the rate Rafa did in his career, right, which was incredible? So I think remains to be seen how much Medvedev can involve, how much he can work around his limitations, and really take it from there. Great. Thank you for tuning in and just giving just listening to this one. Let's hope we get a cracker of an Australian Open and see Daniil Medvedev in action and just having an amazing run there. Goodbye until the next time and take care.